I wasn't watching this. Thank you.
Sure. There is so much.
We will call the January 28th Town Council meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. LeBrow.
Ms. Blanks? Here. Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay?
Here.
Mr. Gold? Here. Ms. Kerrigan? Here. Mr. Sweeney? Mr. Winograd? Here. And Mr. Williams?
Here.
Okay, I have a very special proclamation that I would like to present, and many of you in the audience have I think, a vested interest in this proclamation. So, Kate, I don't know if you can meet me, but I would love to have you join me at the podium. Are you going to be okay? That's okay. All right. Whereas Kate Miller has been a leader and innovator in philanthropy, community development, and the expansion of affordable housing for nearly 40 years. And whereas Kate Miller's professional and personal career has focused on promoting positive social change and improving everyday lives for those in need in her community. And whereas Kate Miller's skills and talents in community development and housing were tapped to lead the local initiative support Corporation, the Hartford Neighborhood Development Support Collaborative, United Way, Food Share, and the Hartford Current Foundation. And whereas Kate Miller served 2 years as director of Troutbrook Realty Advisors, the corporate financing arm of the West Hartford Housing Authority, where she employed her knowledge of housing, finance, and community development while shepherding several major projects in town, most notably the expansion of AF Plant Elderly Affordable Housing, as well as Goodwin Affordable Housing, and the busway-linked housing project on New Park Avenue. And whereas Kate Miller was named to the West Hartford Housing Authority Board and its chair by the Town Council in 2008 and has served until 2018, and whereas Kate Miller has been a resident of West Hartford for more than 30 years, she is married to Jeffrey Daniels and has 2 daughters, Jenna and Casey, and stepson Booth. And now therefore be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council of West Hartford and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby extend sincere appreciation to Kate Miller and proclaim, there's a few hours left, Kate, January 28th, 2020, as Kate Miller Day in West Hartford. And I want to thank all of you from the Housing Authority here for all that you do in our community to make housing accessible to everybody. And I'll give a special shout out to George Howell, who's here as CEO of the Housing Authority. And Kate, thank you for all that you have done for our community. Look at Kate.
When George first told me about this honor, I was speechless. That is not saying much because I am always speechless these days. I totally enjoyed my days at the Housing Authority. and I could have not been effective without the help of George Howell, Jill Corrado, and Joel Rotman, as well as my fellow commissioners, and it certainly would have as fun. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ronnie wants to take a picture. Again. You have made an incredible difference. That was really, Kate has really done so much, and again, thank you to everybody here from the Housing Authority, the board, and the staff for all that you do. All right, number 3, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we receive the Town Council minutes of 1/14/2020.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. I understand that we might have somebody here to speak to something on the agenda. This is the public forum section of the Town Council. You have 3 minutes to speak to something on the agenda that's not the subject of a public hearing. And sometimes people think it's attendance, so I don't know. Oh, Mary Ann Sandberg, as long as this is something on the agenda that's not subject to a public hearing. And state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, distinguished members of the Town Council, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mary Ann Sandberg. Bet most of you know me from the Elmwood Business Association in town. I'm also married to a wonderful man by the name of Rabbi Jack Sandberg. But tonight I come here representing many people in my neighborhood. My subject tonight is about something the Town Council has been discussing for quite a while, and that has been crime. It has been often said that crime today is a way of life, and that it is a sign of our times. If you have ever been a victim of crime, you long for the day that I first remember when I came to West Hartford. The crime in my neighborhood occurred only on Friday and Saturday nights when intoxicated drivers were arrested. A few years ago, our town purchased new street lamps, known for their efficiency. Our streets became darker in our residential neighborhoods. Our streets were so dark that no one could see you, unless, of course, you stood underneath the street lamp. The time has come to raise the wattage in these lamps. Over the past few years, our crime stats have risen dramatically in burglaries of cars, as well as home burglaries. A widowed woman on my street not only had her car burglarized, but her home as well. West Hartford, it is time to light up our streets. We also need to turn on the lights on our front and back entrances of our homes. In the movie Home Alone, an 8-year-old Kevin sees the burglars ready to come into his house. What he does next is simply to turn on the lights on all the entrances of his house. We know burglars don't like to be identified. We all have a responsibility to change the law regarding juvenile offenders. We need to contact our state representatives and ask them to straighten juvenile laws. We cannot give these teenagers a slap on the wrist and send them back out onto the streets to commit crimes over and over again. If we do these simple things, we can reduce crime in West Hartford. West Hartford, for me, has been a great place to live. It is a great place to shop, and most of all, it's a great place to play. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Just for a note, I did let you speak. You can, actually, we're going to go to the next item on the agenda, unless there's anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to something on the agenda. Mary Ann did not speak to something on the agenda. We usually ask for an item that's related to. If you want to speak to the council, you're welcome to write in, and we will set up a time for you to speak. So I did make an exception, but really, anybody else that would like to speak really needs to speak to something on the agenda that's not subject to a public hearing. Okay, with that, we will go to number 5, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that we place items 12A to 12F on consent.
Motion's been made and seconded. I'm sorry you didn't have a chance to look at those. Were all the minutes from the, okay? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 6, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that we postpone item number 6 until the February 11th, 2020 Town Council meeting at 7:30 PM.
Motion's been made and seconded. Do we read the item for the record, or is that okay as is? Mr. Dodge?
It's okay as is, Madam
Thank you.
Mayor.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Number B, Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Winograd, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I ask that this agenda item be withdrawn.
Is there any, motion's been made and seconded? Is there any objection to the item being withdrawn? No? Okay, with that, the item is withdrawn. We don't actually have to take a vote. Number 7, Mr. Davidoff.
Okay, number 7. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that we set for public hearing on March 10th, 2020 at 6:45 PM and refer to TPZ and CROG, an ordinance reducing the number of parking spaces required in a food truck area.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. 7B, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that we set for public hearing on March 10th, 2020 at 7 PM, refer to TPZ and CROG, an ordinance amending the schedule of permitted main use for experiential recreation and restaurant facilities.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. C, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of a resolution to amend cemetery fee schedule.
Motion's made and seconded. Mr. Hart, can you speak to item C?
I would be happy to, Mayor. So this item, we reviewed it, staff reviewed it with the Public Works and Facilities Committee. The town maintains 2 cemeteries, one the old cemetery on North Main Street, and then secondly the Fairview Cemetery. We have not adjusted prices in a significant period of time, and costs have increased. We are, at some point in time, we will run out of space, but the town does need to take care of the cemetery into perpetuity. So we need to make sure that we have a fund with significant balance in order to handle those responsibilities in the future. So we are seeking the council's approval of the proposed fee schedule that is attached to this agenda item. And because we have not raised fees, again, in some period of time, we are seeking a 25% increase in the first year, followed by 10% increases for the following 9 years thereafter. You can see all the rates listed on the resolution here for the various services that we do provide. We did conduct a limited survey, and we do think that these rates are generally consistent with other publicly owned cemeteries in the region. Still below price compared to some private nonprofit cemeteries. Happy to take any questions, Mayor. Perhaps the committee chair, Councilor Winograd, would like to add to my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I was going to yield to Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Hart. Fortunately, the answer is yes. Otherwise, would have been stumbling. No, we did look at this in committee and agree that the rates need to go up. As you noted, the fund needs to be funded. And the last thing we want is to have a future council have to actually apportion taxpayer money to take care of the obligations that we're taking by having cemeteries. So the fund, it needs to be done. One thing we did add in committee, we're not voting on it today, but we did ask for staff to do sort of a further fiscal analysis to make sure that the rates we are doing will be sufficient to ensure the viability long term. So we're hoping that that what we're proposing here will be enough, but we do want to have at least, doesn't have to be right away, but the next year or so, we do want to see that we've made sure that we have ensured full funding for perpetuity, which is what we're dealing with when we're dealing with cemeteries. So thank you very much for your work on this and staff for bringing this to our attention. It would have been a smaller increase had we done this 10 years ago. So I'm glad that we're getting it done now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Any other further? Yes, Ms. Fay.
Yes, I fully support this. The committee did the work, and we did a lot of analysis around surrounding areas. It's unfortunate, it looks like a major increase, but considering there hasn't been one for a very long time, it's certainly reasonable. And, along with the additional funding analysis that Mr. Winograd requested to make sure that this is a solid fund, we'll have to address the space issue separately. So that's what we'll do.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Anybody else? All right. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. I'd like to actually withdraw number D because the recipient that was going to be here and speak to it is not feeling well. If there's no objection, we will withdraw. Any objection? No? Okay. E, Mr. Abraham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of a resolution accepting a donation of the SS Maiden Creek Bell from the U.S. Maritime Administration to the town of West Hartford.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Hart, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So back in 2005, the United States Maritime Administration loaned this item, referred to as known as the Maiden Creek Bell, to the town, and it's located at our Connecticut's Veterans Memorial up there at the corner of North Main and Farmington. Council's very familiar with the memorial. You supported its construction. Anyhow, every 3 to 5 years or so, we've been renewing the loan agreement with the Maritime Administration. I think they are now at the point where they would like to donate it to us permanently so that we don't need to continue to go through that exercise every 3 to 5 years. So we would be very pleased to take this historical item. We think it's been a great addition to the memorial. Really wouldn't increase maintenance costs in any material way. So seeking your support here. And we'd like to thank the Maritime Administration for loaning it to us the past 15 years.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I mean, it is a wonderful piece of history, and hopefully there can be stories told about that it has been on heroic missions of the Merchant Marine in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So I enjoyed learning about it, and it's been there, and I didn't really know the story, so it's kind of nice to hear it, and I appreciate the donation. All right, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Number F, letter F, Mr. David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of a resolution implementing parking rate adjustments.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Hart, explain.
Thank you, Mayor.
Summary.
So as the council knows, we've been talking about this issue for a little while now, particularly at the Special Services District. And staff, we're seeking council's approval to adjust the parking rates. There are two primary reasons behind this. One, as you know, what we call transient or metered parking is now subject to the state sales tax as of January 1st. So we have to collect that tax at 6.35% and remit it to the state, and we're not going to see any of the proceeds. A second cost driver here is that the merchant fees or the bank fees that we're paying, particularly for customers that pay with credit cards, those have increased in recent years. For the current year or the year that recently ended, they were approximately $300,000 on a $3 million fund. That's pretty much 10% of the fund, so that's becoming more and more challenging to absorb that cost. We have not, or the council's been very careful about adjusting the rates over the past several years. The maximum daily rate in the garages, it's at $7 a day. It's been at that level since 2007. The hourly rate in the garages has been at $1.50 an hour since 2007. The on-street rate, we did adjust more recently back in 2014 from $1 to $1.50 in order to incentivize folks to utilize the garages and the surface lots. We've got about 2,500 metered spaces in our inventory. Most are in the garages. We've got 500 on street, another 1,000 in the surface lots. So our proposal is that the standard hourly rate would increase from $1.50 to $1.75. And there would be a cash discount. Folks who choose to pay in cash would pay $1.60 an hour. Very similar to the type of cash discount you would see when you're purchasing your gasoline at the gas station. I've broken down the cost a little bit here in the cover memo for you. On that $1.75 an hour, roughly 11 cents would go towards the sales tax and 14 cents towards the bank fees that I described. If you're paying in cash at $1.60, 10 cents would be remitted to the state. So this is an issue I know that you've worked hard on for some time. We've thought a lot about. I know you're always very careful when it comes to adjusting rates. We're always seeking the right balance here, but I do think that this move is appropriate at this point in time, and we're seeking your support.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Are there any questions or comments?
Do you have a quick question?
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Gold.
Mr. Hart, I just had a quick question. So just in actuality, though, the parking rates for the town aren't increasing. What we're dealing with is bank fees and sales tax that we're collecting that have been passed down to the town. Is that accurate?
That's one way to describe it, but the way we want to handle it and we think would be most transparent to the customer, and we can only put so much verbiage on the kiosks and the meters, is actually increase the rate in order so that it's at a level to absorb the tax as well as the bank fees. But you're right, in terms of the benefit to the parking fund itself, there wouldn't be anything additional other than covering those two costs.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Anybody else? Mr. Sweeney.
So Matt, this is somewhat somewhat similar to how the state deals with gas, right? So if you want to pay cash at a gas station, you get a discounted rate as opposed to if you pay with a credit card, is that right?
Exactly.
Right. So to Mr. Gold's point, we are basically having to deal with this in the same way that you deal with gas exchange due to certain state laws. And so to also be fair to our consumers. I think also the big thing that we're dealing with too is everyone's moving to mobile apps in regards to parking. And that sounds like we would be absorbing an enormous amount of money through just taking that cost on as a town, which seems ridiculous when the vendors are putting that cost onto us. It seems like a silly thing for us to burden the taxpayer with for credit card companies charging us an increase. So I think this is smart. I know the way this kind of came out doesn't sound the way that it is, but we're dealing this very similar to the way that gas stations deal with increases in gas, how the state deals, just generally how consumers are dealt with at the gas station. So we're not necessarily increasing it, but we're trying to deal with all the fluctuation within the economy that deals with the parking. And I think that that's just one thing that I know that we've heard that from multiple different people personally on this issue, and I think it's just one of the things that we should make sure that we educate people about, because no one wants to increase the parking or at all, but I think what we're dealing with is our outside forces that are making us move in this direction. So for a question, Matt, do you know how many users we have or how many transactions we've had through credit cards through the app system? Do you know just a general percentage of how many people we use through that?
I'm not sure about the app, but we have 90,000 credit card transactions per month.
So, I mean, that's a pretty significant amount. But I appreciate your work on this. Matt, I know this has been a very tricky item to nail down, on top of the fact that the state is now throwing a sales tax in on this, which has complicated the entire system. And I think we're not going to be alone in municipalities having a major issue with it. In fact, I think at one of our recent meetings with the state delegation, they actually brought it up as this being something to be reconsidered at the state level, because I think, again, we're probably one of the more advanced towns in regards to parking. So just imagine some of the other towns that have a real trouble with collecting money doing this without apps or anything, just using your traditional methods. But thank you, Matt, appreciate it, and thank you, Mayor, for pushing on us, and thank you for everyone for kind of working on this issue, and Ben as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hart, could you explain in a little more detail where the money goes and how the parking fund operates? Because I know there's been, some sort of talk around of how this is somehow, taking money from parkers for town revenues, as opposed to how the fund works. And if you could explain sort of where does our metered parking money get spent?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So the town has long had a separate fund, the parking fund, which is designed to cover the cost of operating the garages, the surface lots, and the on-street maintenance. So that is separate from the general fund, and it's a conscious decision the council made decades ago to fund parking services through user fees as opposed to through tax dollars. And that division is quite efficient with its work. Those monies support the operations, the general maintenance of the garages, the general maintenance of the surface lots, the on-street. They also help out the staff that work in that division with various special events. We conduct a daily, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, garbage detail in the center every day, utilizing those staff for this purpose. Parking, it's not well understood. Parking is never free. Someone's got to pay for it somewhere. Some communities will do it through a special services tax. Others may add it on to the general fund budget. Our model has long been to charge separately for parking and to maintain this separate parking fund. It's worked well for us for decades.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. And for Blueback Square, it actually goes to paying our bonds, right, on the garages?
Correct,
too,
yes.
in addition. Mr. Williams, did you have something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, and to some of the points that have been brought up already, I mean, this is a very difficult issue, but I think it's another example of sort of where our state legislature lets us down as a municipality by, kind of laying another tax on us that we then have to pass on to the parkers, which arguably could hurt retail and so on and so forth. So I'm glad that the last time we met with our delegation, they said there might be a movement to address this issue. And the other thing is, to the extent there is an increase, well, there's going to be an increase in the parking, I think it's good that we couple that with the resolution we passed some months ago, giving you the discretion, Mr. Manager, to at least start dealing with some of the issues residents are concerned about around the center in terms of parking at late hours. And so it's going to be, I think that's good that we let that as a predicate for this issue to the extent there is an increase in parking in the residential neighborhoods at late hours. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. That's a good point. All good points. But I think in the next resolution, we're going to talk about parking is behavioral. There's a business to parking. It's way more complicated than I ever knew when I joined the council. And it really takes knowledge and expertise. And we, as you have seen, we have not addressed, we haven't raised the fees in a long time. I have talked to our delegation. They are talking about raising this, submitting this as a raised bill to get the tax off. So then we will have to figure that all out, potentially. But we at least won't lose money in the meantime when, and we'll figure out how to deal with that if it is the case. And I invite anyone to help come and testify. I plan to before the Senate or the House, whatever, and we'll when we go, anyway, when they're in session. Okay, with that, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. G, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of a resolution directing the town manager to study a system of preferential resident parking.
Motion's been made and seconded, and actually, I'm going to start with this, and then I'll let my other co-sponsors talk about it if they'd like. One of the biggest, as we just talked about parking being a challenging issue, one of the things that people often ask us is, as residents, why can't we get either some kind of parking pass, a discount, some kind of preferential treatment, some ease? So it's something that we actually had looked at a number of years ago, I think about 7 years ago, and I think we had just brought the app on, or maybe it was about 5 years ago. I think we just brought the kiosks on, and we weren't sure of the capabilities of adjusting, and there really wasn't a good answer. But it's time to at least revisit the question and at least educate us on what the options might be for residential. Maybe it's paying in advance for a pass, and I don't know. But we have requested that town manager study the system of a preferential residential parking system. And with that, I would like to, anybody else would like to speak to? Sure. Mr. Gold.
I guess that's me. No, I know I've spoken about this for several months and heard from townspeople in West Hartford that they having some sort of preferential, not presidential, that's a slip of the tongue, I guess. A preferential parking in town would make sense. I think it would create more traffic in town with people moving into, traveling, shopping, doing things in our centers, and I think it would be certainly something to explore for Mr. Hart to look into and see what would make the best practical sense for our town.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Ms. Fay?
Yeah, I agree. I would say it's on the top 3 probably list of, I don't know if I want to call it complaints or issues, but just some general suggestions that come back from residents. So I think we owe it to them to at least study the factor. I don't have a solution right now. There's a million ones that we could probably come up with, but I think we really need to look into it and see what the financial implications are. But I think if we could do something for residents, it would be nice. And I think it's just one more of those kind of general annoyance things that they live in West Hartford and they're treated like everybody else who comes in to visit. So if we can do something, I would fully support that.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Ms. Kerrigan?
Yeah, I support this. I think that it's really nice when you can say to a resident, the reason that we don't do it is it's this much money, or the reason that we're changing it is because it's this much money. So I appreciate the resolution to study to find out really what we're talking about, because I'd say, I don't know. We don't know what it's going to cost. So I think this is a great investment so we know what we're talking about. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm supporting the resolution because I think that this problem isn't unique to West Hartford. Many communities across the country experience the same demand for parking in their vibrant community centers, and how they interact with a synergy between the business community and the residential community. And what this study will allow us to do will be to explore how other communities across the nation have dealt with that in a positive way. And so what I'm looking for when the study comes back from the manager is what's worked in other communities, what hasn't worked in other communities, what can work here in West Hartford, and what in the end can continue to make our community the destination that it currently is. We're not looking to cause disruption. What we're looking for is some type of forward-looking solution where it's a win for the business community and it's a win for our residents. So that's why I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Anybody else? right, Mr. Sweeney.
Just echo this. I think we owe this to the residents to have, to Ms. Kerrigan's point, to have an answer. And I think, Madam Mayor, you've talked about that. I think and as Mr. Williams talked about, we've been doing a lot of stuff dealing with parking. I think we owe it to them to get an idea of what this kind of atmosphere is and how do we adjust it and how do we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd.
And as the chair of the committee that will get the honor of approaching this issue, on behalf of the other members of the committee, Mary and Carol, I hope I can speak for all of us when we say we are eager to give it a shot. So I'm sure we'll have a good discussion in committee and try to see what we can come up with.
So I would like to amend the motion to adopt, but also refer to the public, what's your committee's name again? Public, that. So we don't want it just floating around. So I hope would somebody want to second that? Motion's been made and seconded. And with that, if there's no further comments, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. And number 8, Mr. Hart, reports from the town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just pull that up. Relatively short report this evening. First, under council business and meetings, I've listed the next couple committee meetings, as well as the council meetings. Public safety will meet next week on the 5th at 6:30. Human and Community Services at 8 a.m. on the 10th. Community Planning and Economic Development at 5:30 on the 10th. Your next regular council meeting will be on the 11th. And I want to draw your attention to a special town council meeting that we would look to hold on the 13th at 5:30. And the purpose for that is to allow the MDC to make a presentation on its integrated plan. Recall, our veteran council members, they were here in December, requested that opportunity, and we told them that we would bring them in the new year. So we'd like to do that. The committees, I think we've adopted a schedule for all of our standing committees. I appreciate the chairs, your commitment to that. The committee meetings are very important. That's where we get the bulk of our work done in between meetings. It's where you get a chance to dive into items in some detail, ask your questions, get a better understanding of the issues that are coming to the full council. So appreciate everyone's support for setting this schedule, and look forward to seeing your commitment through 2020. Moving on, couple items under staff reports. The library, always lots of great things happening at our public libraries. Really appreciate their good work. They now have mobile hotspots available. All 3 branches of the library have that, and that's available for folks who have an active library card, and that's a neat service that they can provide. Also very happy to report that 2 bond rating agencies, both Moody's and S&P, have reaffirmed our AAA bond rating with a stable outlook. In addition to that, the AAA bond rating is the highest that you can receive. Less than 1% of the local governments across the country have this AAA rating. Why is it so important? The better the bond rating you have, the better the interest rate you're able to receive on the bonds that you pay. And the bonds, that's the primary form of debt we issue, are general obligation bonds, and it finances the largest component of our capital improvement program. So in a couple days, we'll be selling $17 million worth of bonds. That's a lot of money. And because we have this rating, because we do many, many things well, we'll be getting a very favorable interest rate, and that will benefit our taxpayers over the course of the debt repayment schedule. So kudos to you for your support for our good financial practices, and kudos to Peter Privatera and the other members of their team for their good work in making this happen. And I want to thank the mayor for her participation in the rating calls. I think it's nice to show the rating agencies the partnership between our elected officials and the staff. And then lastly, 2 items I did not write up officially in my report. Mayor, I'd like to commend you on a very successful State of the Town address today. Packed house, as usual, and a very, very nice job. I love the theme, looking back 100 years, but also the past decade, seeing what's transpired. And it's fabulous to see the support and the energy in that room when you deliver that address. So congratulations on a job well done. And then I would also like to thank a staff member in the town clerk's office, Cindy Perini, who has, many of you, if not all of you, know Cindy. She's really stepped up and helped out during a transition period in my office. We've been down a position. We're actually recruiting for that tomorrow. But Cindy has really helped out tremendously. Ms. LeBreau, I'd like to extend my thanks to you as well, and everybody in your office for pitching in during this time. So that completes my report, Mayor. Happy to take any questions council members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Okay, Mr. Sweeney.
I just wanted to commend Matt and the legal department for their work on the parking conversation. I know it was a lot of back and forth and a lot of overtime put into it, but really appreciate getting it right. And again, appreciate your service, and Councilor Dodge. Well done.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Councilman Sweeney.
Very good. Anybody else? All right. I also just want to thank Matt's leadership and Peter's leadership on the bond ratings. When you sit in the room and you hear analysts that are seeing communities from all over the country and rating them, and they talk about you in such glowing terms, it really makes an impact. And when you understand that you're doing not always the most popular thing, but what's responsible in the long run for our community, it means a lot. So thank you for that. All right, and so now I will go to announcements. Sorry, I'm still on the town manager's report. It doesn't want to give me the announcements. There we go. No, it's not even coming up. Oh, it is. Slab chat. What's on your mind? Share your thoughts and ideas with Senator Derek Slab on Friday, January 31st, 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. at the West Hartford Senior Center, 15 Starkle Road. And then Playhouse on Park shows Janet Yates of Voight and Mark Friedman's Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical at Playhouse on Park runs through February 2nd. Tickets range from $40 to $50 with reserved seating. Playhouse on Park's season continues with Kate Hamill's Pride and Prejudice, running February 19th to March 8th. Tickets for performances are February 19th to March 8th. To March 8th. They're now on sale, and they range from $30 to $40. Are there any other announcements? No? All right. With that, we will go to reports from Corporation Counsel. Councilor Dodd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you're all aware, typically when my office reports on settlements, it is usually money going out. I am very pleased to report that my first settlement I will report on is money coming in. So in December, we settled the matter West Hartford versus Aquatics for Life. And last week, the settlement check, which I believe was in the amount of $85,000, came into the town. And so I wanted to commend Attorney Garvin Newsom in my office, and also Pete Privitera, our Director of Finance, who I know put yeoman's work into this matter. And so it was a very good result for the town. And I can't really get into too much detail about it, but I did just want to commend them for their work on that. And we will require no executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge, and congratulations. Thank you. I know that was a lot of work on your part, and it wasn't just the dollars, it was the point. So thank you so much. All right. Any questions for Mr. Dodge? All right. With that, I have an appointment. David Paluke is appointed to I move that we appoint David Paluke to the Commission on Veterans Affairs for a term ending 12/31/2022.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Communications, Mr. Davidoff, 13A.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we receive a communication from Moises Salas resigning from the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District.
Motion's been made and seconded. I want to thank Moses for his service. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. 13B, Mr. David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we table a resignation from the Prevention Council from Ben Grippo.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Number 14, Mr. David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of the consent calendar.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. We have no petitions, no executive session. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Good night.